was dope.
And welcome back to Rufus the Villain's True Crime Corner. It's been almost a month and a half.
Yo, what's up? Glad to be back.
Yeah. We took a hiatus because we were just like trying to get our shit together.
Yes, definitely.
So like, who are we doing tonight, Josh?
We are doing Herman Webster Mudgett, better known as H.H. Holmes.
Yes. Like it's this was actually your suggestion, which I thought was really cool because like we did what have we done so far? We've done Ed Gein,
Yes.
Jeffrey Dahmer,
Capone.
Al Capone,
Butch Cassidy.
and Butch Cassidy. So that's where we've been at so far.
Yep.
So just to get this show on the road. So born Herman Webster Mudgett, or like one of the names he took on early in his childhood was Dr. Henry Howard Holmes, which is weird. And, like he just like took that name on without like actually even going to like any types of school. But he was born in May 16th in 1861 in Gilmanton, New Hampshire.
Okay.
It's Gilmanton, Gilmanton,
Okay.
New Hampshire, and that was May 16th, 1861. So he eventually like right off the bat like started taking on like different names, because back in the day you didn't have to have like an ID card.
Right.
You didn't have to like, oh, this is me. You
Yeah. Well, I know later on, especially when he moved towns, he switched his name, but I didn't realize that he had played around with it at such an
early
young
age. Yeah, well, that's what. Speaking of which, we have to give our source material. My main one was Murder in America. I'm drawing a blank for the author, but I'll put that in the liner notes on the show.
Okay.
And then the other one was The Devil in the White City.
Okay.
And then, of course, a little bit of peppering of LP.
Yeah, of course.
Because those guys are legit.
Definitely.
But like early on in life, like before the age of 16, he used the name Henry Howard Holmes, Harry M. Howard, Henry Gordon, and Alexander Bond. Like
Okay.
those are like the names that
Bond.
yeah.
Alex Bond.
Alex Bond, serial killer Bond. But like the big thing is we'll get into it later. His main crime spree was at the same time as Jack the Ripper, and people are like, oh, it's the same guy. Like, no,
Yep.
no,
Yep. He was mainly active in the 1890s.
right, which was the same time as the Whitechapel murders.
Yep. Yep. And mainly during the World's Fair. I have that he had a confirmed body count of 9.
9. Well, he confessed to
27.
27.
Yep.
But the thing is like if you get it like in the Murder in America book, it's upwards of like 70. Like if you like really look into the forensics of like shit it's like upwards of 70.
Yeah, well, there were accounts of over 50 people disappearing in his
Right,
castle,
right,
but we'll
yeah,
get into all that.
yeah. It was pretty amazing, right? It's pretty amazing. So H.H. Holmes, we'll just call him that from this point on,
Okay.
was the first urban American serial killer.
Yes.
First urban American, because there was guys that were doing this and during the cowboy time. Like you could be a cowboy and shoot 10 people. You wouldn't be called a serial killer. You'd just be called a cowboy.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that was just due to just sort of like, the literal Wild West and just no really form of standard law enforcement.
Exactly. That's an awesome point. Because like, it's like, hey, let's draw.
Yeah.
And just draw. You know what I mean? Like, so it harkens back to like the samurai having duels.
Yeah.
Like that's why you can't like kind of say a serial killer at that point. You get what I'm getting at there?
Yep.
So we just mentioned that he confessed to 9, but was probably connected to more than that.
Yep.
The big thing about him was he was a compulsive liar.
Yes.
Like anything that came out of his mouth, you couldn't take for.
Oh, he was definitely a pathological liar.
Yeah.
For
Well,
sure.
and that speaks to like I have a little bit later in my research of like his psychopathy, because he was a legit psychopath.
Oh yeah.
A legit psychopath. He actually turned out to be what was not just a. I'm drawing a blank. He's not. He was two types of serial killer.
He was a product and process.
Product. Thank you. Yes. Because like he did it for 2 types of reasons. Like he just like did his own fucking thing. You know what I mean?
Yes, well, I mean, so he was a process killer in the sense that he enjoyed it, but he was a product killer in the sense that he had a purpose in killing the people, whether it was an insurance scam or whatever the case may have happened upon.
Whatever would benefit him.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever would benefit him. So like what I want to get onto next was he had three brothers. No, he was two of three brothers.
Yep. Tell me, what do you have about his parents in his childhood?
Well, I didn't get his parents' names, which I should have written down. Oh.
So they were Levi and Theodate.
That was his parents. Yes. Levi and Theodate.
This is also
so. Yeah, I was like going on the wrong part of my research right now. Like, yeah, that was his parents, Levi and Theodate.
I would probably call this a silver badge episode.
Yeah,
it's not quite on
well,
the level
as long as we omit the masturbation.
Well, you just included it.
Yeah, but yeah, that's a heads up. That's a heads up. So, but he was the youngest of three brothers. His family were devoted Methodist, which he never got into. Like that was never any part of his mindset. And the crazy thing that I was reading is they used to beat the fuck out of him.
Oh yeah.
They would actually lock him in the attic as punishment.
Yeah, but he was still a self-described mama's boy.
Right. And it's kind of crazy to think. Sorry, guys. It's kind of crazy to think that at that time of a person that was of this mindset, taking a sidestep and this is not what I want to do. Think about that. And at that time, you got a whole family that's Methodist and are super religious. It's not normal to sidestep out of that. You got that's it's like a psychopathic thing, because if your brain is your mindset and your brain is set to this is what we do, and he was like fuck that. He actually started in his early childhood was the Great Chicago Fire.
Right. Yep. 1871.
Yeah, and he actually dreamed of his parents being in that fire.
Yep.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that speaks to the psychopathy of his condition. He was not normal from the start. You or I are born, in a completely different age. But if you or I had visions of our parents getting burned in a fire, somebody would probably be like, "Hey,
Yeah. Well, I mean, he definitely always.
And he was actually at an early age averse to death.
He was a pathological liar, and he was a big embellisher of everything that basically he said.
The little white lies.
But he always claimed to be sort of sponsored by a dark being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
Yeah,
we're gonna get to that. Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
So,
but the big thing that I want to get at too, I couldn't find the exact age. But he was always averse to death. He didn't want to see it. And then he had some bullies actually force him into a doctor's office where there was a skeleton.
He was 11.
Was that the age?
Yeah, he was 11.
So he was forced into going in and looking at this, and it kind of it drove the fear away. Is actually the phrase that I found from him. He was like, I'm. Okay, here's a dead body. That's not as scary as I thought it was going to be. So that actually, in his younger life, actually pushed him into starting to study medicine.
Mm-hmm.
And saying that Holmes studied medicine is a very kind of small phrase. He was a con man through the entirety of his career.
Well, yeah, I mean, he basically used his medical knowledge to further his criminal means.
Well, the big thing is the state of medicine at that time. It's it was there was resurrection men.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a lot involved in actually studying the human body, because Christianity and stuff like that, you can't touch the human body after it dies.
They considered it desecration.
Yeah, you couldn't look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's where, like, I'll get into Resurrection Man, like, later. But, like, that's kind of where he gets into his, like, his role and things. Like, at the age of 11, he actually started dissecting live animals.
Yep.
Live animals. And he was, like, he would actually start keeping pieces of them, which is kind of, think about that right now. Say you had an 11-year-old and you came across him, like, dissecting a squirrel and it was alive.
Yeah.
And you're like, no, Tommy, you can't do that. Like that, some pretty scary shit, man. But he had one friend named, I think his name was Tom.
Yeah, that's right.
Tom, and he actually died suspiciously, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they were playing in an abandoned building and he died in a fall.
Yeah, and I'll leave it up to you guys whether Holmes pushed him or not.
Yeah.
So at that age, he actually started having fantasies of killing as a young kid. Like, he actually started having fantasies.
Okay.
And the book in the Murder in America is like from like it's there's like a lot of transcripts from him, but he actually started having fantasies at an early age of killing for power.
Oh.
Like to be the one in control. So just to kind of move forward, he graduated high school at the age of 16, which is kind of impressive for the time.
Definitely. Yeah, he was always very smart in school.
Yeah, well, he was very adept. He was fucking very adept. He married his first wife at the age of 18. Her name was Clara Lovering.
Yep.
Lovering? I spelled it. In the book, it's Lovering. Lovering.
Yep, just Lovering.
So Holmes left her to go to medical college at the U of Michigan, which was the leading school of dissection at the time, which was not looked on fondly.
Right.
Like taking bodies and taking them apart. Like, big thing about that was like religion. Like, they didn't want you to desecrate the body.
Exactly. Yeah.
So like this is about the same time to where he like started coming up with his first schemes. And the big thing is, in college, he was like super ambitious. Like, he was like knocking through classes, like just one after another. He got a questionable degree of being a pharmacologist.
Indeed.
Which is like, there's no way to actually determine whether that was actually true or not. So like he had a lot of really weird things going on at the time. Where this is where he came up with his first his first like actual scam. It's like his first like the big thing is his first real way he went at things was fraud. Like he would like come up with like insurance frauds and have somebody get attacked by somebody and like in court be like, oh yeah, he attacked me, and like would have people like say, oh yeah, I saw it happen. Like that. There was a lot of that.
Yep, just insurance scamming and things
Yeah,
like that.
like he came up with a lot of that. So he actually, at that point, actually became a fake book salesman.
Oh, yeah, in his junior year, right?
Yeah, he would go around and like sell books, and like, okay, yeah, they'll come to you at the end of the year. Let me
Right.
collect
He would
money.
have like a sample book, and he would like go up and knock on somebody's door, be like, "Hey, I have this set of encyclopedias. Here's a sample. If you give me a $50 down payment, I'll send you the money. Send you the set in the mail when I get back to my office."
and it would never
And
come.
he just kept the money and they never got anything.
And it would never come. So his big scam, which would come into the play later, is corpses, the health or the life insurance scam.
Right.
To where he like, this is where like came into his head. It was like, okay, let's find somebody that's willing to give me a life insurance policy, and then we'll bring a fake body, because at that point there was no like photographs, there was no fingerprints,
no ID bank, no way to properly justify that someone was who they said they were.
Yeah, and like you could bring in anybody that was disfigured at any degree and be like, yeah, this is this guy.
Exactly.
And like have somebody come in and say like, yeah, this is him. So that was like, he didn't pull that off yet. Like he had an idea with one of his actual schoolmates, but he never actually did that. He never actually did it with him. The big thing that I want to get into is like, at this point, this is the true point of a psychopath. Because psychopathy is a really weird kind of big, broad big broad like rainbow spectrum.
Right.
Like there's people that are bankers that are psychopaths. There's people that are doctors that are psychopaths. But like you have to really understand the psychopathy of what that is.
I think sort of what you're alluding to is similar to what happened in the 1980s. Where all these high power business people, were actually had a lot of psychopathic and sociopathic tendencies, but they were so successful that it was sort of overlooked.
Right, exactly.
And so people in Holmes's time, they aspired to be these great industrialists and businessmen, and they just sort of didn't care who they stepped on along the way to get there. And so that was what he aspired to be. And so particularly when he got out of college and he realized that he could influence people with, the way that he presented himself as far as being professionally dressed and well spoken and things like that.
Well, he was dapper as a motherfucker, dude.
He realized that sort of gained social progress for him, and he was able to manipulate people more efficiently when he presented that way.
Exactly, you're 100% on point.
Yeah,
that's the definition of a psychopath, dude. Like, there's so many people that you like. I think I read it was like you meet in everyday life, like you meet like 10 psychopaths a day, like just like on differing levels. You
right,
know, like,
of course, yeah.
So at this point, he's finishing college. He actually gets a job in a pharmacy in Philadelphia.
Yep.
He actually he faked to be a pharmacist, and then he actually killed a woman for the scripts. Did you get that? He actually killed a woman he actually came across a woman, killed her, took the scripts, and gave them out to other people.
Okay, I know I didn't get anything on that. I read that he had accidentally poisoned a woman, and that
well, that's what I'm getting at. That's
okay.
Oh, that's exactly what I'm getting at. He accidentally poisoned a woman and actually took the scripts and moved on.
Okay, yeah, because that was when he moved out.
That was in 1886.
Yep.
And he leaves Chicago in 1886, taking on
Philadelphia. You mean?
He leaves Philadelphia to Chicago.
Yep.
In 1886, taking on the name H.H. Holmes.
Right.
So that's at the time it was a boom town. Chicago was a boom town. Like that's where everything was like just getting crazy big.
Right. Well, and that speaks to, like you said before, the Great Fire. So
I'm glad you corrected me from what I just
the thing
said.
about that is that all of the old structures were all wooden, and so there was the Great Fire of 1871, which is allegedly started by a cow. But that's a story for another time.
Allegedly.
And so it basically wiped out all these dry old wooden buildings. And so then they had this nice flat urban landscape where they could build all these new modern buildings. And so
Right.
Chicago was actually the beginning of like modern architecture as far as the cities are concerned.
I'm glad. I'm not to interject, but like I have this written down that is just perfect for what you're saying. It was the home of the first skyscraper.
It was the home of the first skyscraper,
Yeah.
and so a lot of people were using the new railroad to travel, and so there were a lot of people flocking to these larger cities, particularly Chicago.
You're hitting on my points. Keep going. Keep going.
It was like the hub of the Midwest, basically, right? And so not only did you have all these thousands and thousands of people coming to Chicago, you had thousands of gullible young farm girls who were traveling by themselves that were out on their own for the first time.
Right. Well, that speaks to the influx of the new jobs and stuff like that.
Exactly. Because they were, this was the first time they were really able to gain independence
and do
as
it,
women.
and they were able to do it to themselves.
Yeah,
for themselves. Like and do the speaking on like to kind of like piggyback on what you were talking about is like women didn't have that independence at that time, and they got to go leave and be on their own due to the railroads.
Exactly.
Stuff like that, which kind of really changed a lot of things.
Yep. We talked about that in the last episode.
Yeah, we did. So one of the big things I want to get into is in Chicago at the time, due to the poor conditions, there was a huge condition of. I actually wrote this down from the book. The way they put it was a huge condition of death. Mm-hmm. There was just so much going on. Like there was rotting animals on the ground, garbage. Like there's just so much pestilence is the word.
Yes, well, and I think a lot of that was because there was no like proper city sanitation. Like
Exactly.
everything was sort of capitalist in the sense that you had to pay for these services, and so if you weren't
fire,
willing
garbage.
to pay these organizations for these services, they just didn't come.
Hell yeah.
And so I think a lot of the trash and the dead animals and things sort of led to further infection and like sickness for humans.
Exactly. Like it only got worse as more people got there.
So even though it was like this industrial boomtown, it was still a very dirty city.
Yeah, like one of the things I wrote down was murder. Murder was common. There was 1,600 murders in 1 year.
I also understand that there were approximately 2 people a day killed by a train. That, like streetcars would fall on people randomly. It was rough.
Streetcars falling on. Well, we're laughing now, but we weren't there. But the big thing they were kind of alluding towards coming up, in a couple years is the World's Fair, which is going to be a big player in this.
Exactly. Yep. It was just sort of like the perfect storm for him.
Millions of people being in town.
Mm-hmm.
Millions of people being in town. So in 1888, Holmes finds a job as a pharmacist in Inglewood, across the street from a vacant lot in Wallace and 63rd Street.
Which, of course, was just like a suburb of Chicago.
Yeah, and at that point, 63rd Street was a big vacant lot.
Yep.
The owner's husband was sick, and he took a job to take care of the pharmacy at the time.
So they were.
I didn't get her name. I
couldn't
couldn't find her name.
I don't have it either. They were an elderly couple, and so her husband was actually the pharmacist, and so he was bedridden upstairs.
And Holmes is like, I'm a pharmacist. Holmes is like, I'm a pharmacist. I can help you do this.
She was struggling to sort of keep afloat, and so he came in and got a job. Yep.
Yeah, he like took it over for a while, and then after 2 years, he dies, and Holmes offers to buy the pharmacy on a payment plan.
Yeah.
And he didn't pay it.
He never paid anything.
Yeah,
he was the ultimate con man. Like
Yeah.
I think, and at this point, he's sort of developing
That's psychopathy, dude. He was a psychopath, dude.
He becomes like this supervillain.
Dude, I love that phrase. Yes, he was a he was a
like,
supervillain. He was the Penguin. That's what
Yeah.
Henry says. Yes, he was the Penguin. Yes.
He really was a supervillain. Like, not only was he like the first urban serial killer, but he had all these other motives and means.
Yeah.
So it's
just that there was no Batman to stop him, dude.
He just had so much other stuff going on than like your typical serial killer, which sort of, I think, gives him a different classification.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying. Like, he was a supervillain, though. He really was a supervillain. So right off the, like going, like he never paid anything.
Yeah. The only thing he ever paid for was chloroform.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like, so she ends up the wife. I couldn't find the husband and wife's name.
I don't have it.
But she ends up filing a suit against Holmes.
Yeah, because he never paid anything.
Yeah, and then she fucking disappeared.
Yep.
And then she fucking disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
He told everyone she left to go to California.
Of course, yeah.
Like, that's Holmes. Like, he's like, yeah. At the time, how are you going to check up on that?
The new railroad, man. What can you say?
Yeah,
Everybody's going everywhere.
So what we have next is Murda Z. Belknap, his second wife.
Yes.
And she was completely oblivious to what Holmes was doing.
So at this point, he bought he bought, quote unquote, the pharmacy.
Yeah.
So he's running the pharmacy.
Yeah,
at this
and
point.
both of the original runners are gone.
Yeah, and so he, his wife is sort of like doing the office work and stuff upstairs.
Right,
and
right.
He's like downstairs flirting with all the hot single ladies.
And
right?
she took issue.
Yeah.
She took issue.
Yep.
Yeah, but eventually they had their very first kid, which I didn't get the name for.
Julie. I
Was
think.
it Julie?
I think so.
Yeah, like the big thing I remember reading in the book is like when Belknap, like Holmes was like, because he was like a ladies' man, and he was like down there at the bottom of the structure at the pharmacy, like flirting with chicks, and she was pissed.
Well, again, successful, well dressed, well spoken, business owner. You know, like he has a medical degree. He owns this business. Like he's a good catch. You know, as far as people know.
Well, look at that picture. The picture there's like only 4 pictures of Holmes.
Yeah, there's a few.
But you look at him at the times, he was dapper, man. And he had a derby and a mustache.
Yeah,
he had a derby and a mustache. So she leaves with their first kid because she was upset with the way Holmes was acting. She didn't want to be with the guy that wasn't going to be faithful. So she left with Holmes' first daughter.
yes,
You know, and she never comes back into the picture again.
right.
Like, good for her though.
Yeah, exactly.
Good for her though.
She was lucky.
Yeah, she was lucky. You know, like I'm sure there's some lineage there to where she can like trace it back and like that. Like H. Holmes was my dad. Ugh. So a little bit of time goes by. Holmes actually buys the lot across the street.
Yep.
Which was he actually bought it under a fake name.
Of
as
course.
H.S. Campbell was the name that he bought the lot under.
I think that was one of kind of like his common aliases.
Yeah. He had so many aliases because like it's back in the day, dude. There was no ID cards. Like you just said, this is me. That's my name.
Exactly.
Like my name is Joseph S. Frank, and you take that at face value.
Exactly.
And I made that name off the top of my head because that's how easy that is.
Yeah.
So the construction of the castle begins. Then that's one of the biggest things of his biggest cons. It's like he never fucking paid anybody
Exactly.
for the construction of this castle. He sketched. I'm gonna pull the mic down in a better spot. He sketched the plans out himself. That way, he was the only one that knew like the ins and outs and the layout of the actual castle itself.
Exactly.
And we call it a castle at this point, but you know, like he would actually give details to different contractors and then stop them, and switching the worker out and then giving them different plans.
Right. So I mean, and there were a lot of sort of day laborers, you know.
Well, there was 500 workers overall.
Yeah. So he would hire these people and say, okay, you're going to work on this section, and then they would work there for a month or so, and then he would fire them and go hire new people and say, you're going to do this.
He would say, oh, you didn't finish your job, so I'm not going to pay you.
Yeah, and then he would like scam them out of the money, and he just never paid anybody.
And he did that to 500 fucking people.
Yep. And like I said, though, a lot of them were sort of like new to the city. You know, they were arriving there for work because it was such a booming city, and so they really didn't have any roots, you know, and they
exactly.
They were it was hard for them to get paid.
Well, like in the book Murder in America, the big thing, we'll get into this later. The big thing that was the hardest to construct is what Holmes called the sleeping pipes, and like that's, I'm sorry, like even today, if you were a construction worker and you were, do you remember what the sleeping pipes were?
Yeah, they were basically pipes that, so the second floor was pretty much all the weird rooms.
The second floor was like the murder floor.
Exactly.
Basically.
It was the murder floor. So they were just like these random pipes that went from, you know, a gas supply to just like pipe into rooms. It was like an AC duct, but it was just like a gas pipe, basically.
And they were greased.
Yeah. Well, he had grease chutes that he used to send bodies down to the cellar, but they were different from the gas pipes.
Yeah.
So they were kind of like butler chutes.
Right.
Down to the cellar because he couldn't necessarily walk around carrying bodies in the hallways.
Right. It's the secret pathways.
You know, but all of the gas pipes had levers up on the third floor in his bedroom where he could individually control the gas to each specific
from his own like
bedroom,
office, which is kind of amazing. You know, like if you think about it today, man, that's Supervillain shit.
Yeah,
that's Supervillain.
So
shit.
It took up the whole block, right?
It was 3 stories tall and took up an entire city block.
Yeah. So the first block was his. So he built a new pharmacy on the first floor. What happened to the old pharmacy?
The old pharmacy actually got torn down, from what I read.
But he sold it first, right?
Well, he sold the property.
Well, so I understood that he sold the pharmacy, and so the guy that he sold it to did not read the fine print.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And so the guy bought the pharmacy, and then while he was gone back to his hometown to pick up his family, Holmes took all of the inventory out, all of the supplies, all of the fixtures, all of everything out, took it across the street, put it in his new pharmacy, and then the guy basically got an empty building, and he got all of the inventory, all of the medicine, all of the supplies.
Well,
that's
the big thing. Holmes was like, he was this is like the fourth time I've used this phrase, but fucking psychopath, dude. Like the most sadistic way to take advantage over other people.
Yeah,
like that's like what he did, man.
Agreed.
So at about this time, the construction of the castle starts to begin, and then Benjamin Peitzel in 1889 answers an ad to be a carpenter.
Yep.
I think that's what I found, was a carpenter.
Yep, that's right.
So Peitzel was kind of like what did we say earlier? He was a goon.
He was definitely a goon.
Yeah, he was a goon. Like he basically did anything Holmes would pay him for, with like sight unseen, would just like pay him for it.
Well, because he was a severe alcoholic, and he also had 7 kids. So he needed the money for his family, and he couldn't really hold a steady job. So he was willing to do whatever Holmes wanted him to do because he paid him decently well. So
one of the other things I wanted to talk about with the castle itself is it had 51 doors, 6 hallways, 35 rooms.
that was just the second floor.
Yeah. And most of those were airtight and one-way doors.
And soundproof.
Yeah, it's soundproof. And that's you're not a normal like building builder if you do that. Like, and like there was like a lot of dead-end hallways. There was like we talked about before, like controls of gas pipes and stuff like that.
Yep, and when they would ask questions, he would just fire them.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the biggest thing that like in my research in Murder in America, like with his big thing having the murder castle, he had access to so many chemicals.
Oh yeah,
with the pharmacy downstairs.
definitely.
Like he had access to chloroform, he had access to formaldehyde,
Cocaine, laudanum, which was basically methadone.
Yeah, and that's was kind of scary. Like he had all that on hand.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of the rooms actually had like peepholes to where you could like watch.
Oh yeah.
Like that's some scary ass shit. Like that's where he got. I'm not going to get into. I stay away from that shock jock shit. But like that, he got off on like watching people suffer.
Yep. And what about the safe?
The safe was crazy. The safe, like I forget what he paid for it, but he actually paid. He bought it on credit.
He didn't pay anything.
He got it on credit,
Yeah.
and then got it put into the structure of the home, and was like, okay, you can take it, but if you mess up the foundation of the house, you're gonna pay for it.
Yeah.
And like that's a true psychopath. Like he thought about that ahead of time.
Oh yeah, he planned it out. And so the safe was actually where he did a lot of his kills too, right?
2 of his wives.
Yeah.
2 of his wives. Like we talked about the grease shoots already, and the one of the things I've read in I keep going back to Murder in America. I cannot recommend this book enough. Like I'll put a tag on it like he actually in his basement he actually had a very, very advanced chemical dissolving system.
Mm-hmm.
Like he actually had to have a very, very advanced understanding of chemical engineering to because he put together this, from what is understood from the like the site itself. He actually had a very advanced understanding of chemical technology to put together what he put together to dissolve the bodies.
Yep, that's true.
Because it wasn't this rudimentary, just throw him in acid and let him burn out. Like he had his own concoction.
It was like lime and lye.
It was lime and sulfuric acid and something else.
Yeah.
But that's pretty fucking, for him to have that understanding, that makes him scary. That makes him a supervillain.
Oh yeah.
And he also did cremation, and they put that. He had a kiln put in his basement.
You mean the glass blowing?
The glass blowing kiln. Yeah. He's like, I realized that's too small for. I realize that's tiny for glass blowing, but I don't want the people upstairs to smell the glass fumes.
Right. Hey, by the way, this should burn off all the glass fumes, right?
So as it goes on, he actually had operation tables in the basement as well. Oh, you know what I'm talking about? You know,
I am not sure I read that.
he had operation tables and he actually he hired a man to help him clean stuff up. His name was Charles Chappell.
Yep.
He was a articulator.
Yep. His specialty was articulating skeletons.
Yeah. So he actually hired him to like as the skeletons like built up. He brought Chapel up to a room they actually had a dead body at, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this person died, and I'm doing an autopsy."
Goon number two.
But he showed him the body, and he assumed that it was an autopsy. He actually paid him $36 to strip the flesh.
Yep.
And he sold it. Holmes sold it to the Hamilton Medical College for $200.
And so by articulating skeletons,
it makes it look like it was alive.
Well, it makes it. They just like clean it and sort of put it on a stand.
Stand it up, and it's there. You know? So the big thing there, like we kind of get into, kind of like jumping forward. There's like grave robbing for exhumation. There was a lot of grave robbings at that point that were taking place in like insane asylums because they were popular.
Right.
So that's kind of like where Holmes kind of like hit his niche.
Yep.
That's like because he was, if you really think about it, he was pumping out like maybe 3 to 4 bodies a week.
Oh yeah.
If you really like get into it.
He had like some mechanical scams too. As
Yes,
far
he
as,
did.
Like, machines. And
Yeah,
stuff,
they
right?
called them flim flam machines.
Yeah.
Flim flam machines. Yeah, the one that was like would create gas and stuff like that.
So the one allegedly would turn water into like
Water into gas,
gasoline, like
Yeah.
petroleum.
Yeah. Turn it into combustible gas is what it was. Yeah. So we go on from there. Like Holmes is like making his money. Like he's got this chloroform dealer. That's like the only dude that he ever actually paid
Exactly.
because like that's you got to pay your dealer.
Yep.
You know, like that's like one of the only guys. I didn't get the name of the chloroform dealer,
No.
but you know that's back at that time you probably were kind of anonymic.
He's the ice cream man.
He's the ice cream man. So at that point, like Holmes kind of has a erotic connection to death.
Yeah.
And like I said, we're not shock jocks. We're not going to get into that. But like he gets into what's called the death throes.
So like you were saying, a lot of the times he would use chloroform, and so one of the effects of chloroform when they would asphyxiate.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
They would sort of have
Seizures and
involuntary spasms, and right before death, and that was just something that he was into.
Yeah. And we'll just leave it at that.
Let's do.
Yeah. So like the big thing is like people were like starting to notice like people like checking in and their stuff being left behind.
Oh yeah.
Like it's gonna be noticed, man. And the big thing is like a lot of people noticed that it was like people like men would come to check in and they were like, "Oh, we're full."
Yeah, he would always turn away men.
Yeah.
But he was particularly forgiving of young women who suddenly left and didn't pay their bills.
You're right. And then on that note, like he would hire a lot of women employees that would have to sign a life insurance policy.
Yeah.
That would name him as the benefactor.
Yeah, that's true.
Like doing that now, like that would draw some attention. But the thing is, like Holmes was like charming as fuck. Like detectives would come to the hotel.
Yeah.
And how did they phrase it on LP? Like send him away with a handshake and a pat on the back.
Yeah. He was always very friendly, and like he appeared very trustworthy, and he was always very sort of disarming in his personality when he talked to people. And yeah, he would always send people away with like a laugh and a handshake, So,
and he was able to pull it off, man. He was able to pull it off.
Yeah.
Like, so the next thing I actually have written down in my notes is like the flim flam machines. One of the big of his flim flam machines was like his abortion tables. Like there was a lot of weird fucking shit. He just stuff that he would would turn into his autopsy tables is what it was, but he had that, like, we'll get into later, like, well, we talked about it prior, like his putting up scams. Like he would have, like we talked about the gas thing and all that, you know.
Yep. And the water purification, like he would like
Right.
illegally tap the city water and then like purify it, quote unquote,
send
and
it
then
back.
sell it. Yeah.
So yeah, he ended up coming across the doctor. I cannot fucking pronounce the doctor's first name right, but he ended up be called by the name Ned.
That he was his pharmacist, right?
Yeah, he was his pharmacist. He had a wife named Julia that after a while Holmes took notice of.
Yes.
And he started like I remember in the reading it was like creating a correspondence. Like that he like ended up like started talking to her and
Well, because she was the
she ended up-
pharmacist's wife, so she was in the city.
well, she ended up taking over the pharmacist role.
Okay.
She ended up taking over that. So Holmes seduces Julia, and then later Ned finds out and actually files for divorce.
Yes, but by this time Holmes was already tired of her.
And which means he has already decided to kill her.
Yeah.
So it was actually a year from the research I did. It was like a year later. Ned finds out, files for divorce, and at that point Julia's pregnant. And that's kind of a fucked up thing. You know what I mean? Like so, like Holmes is like, I'm done with this, you know what I mean? But like I'll be your husband
Yeah.
if you let me perform an abortion.
Yes.
And Julia's like, okay, that speaks to how charming Holmes was.
Exactly.
And Julia actually had a daughter named Pearl already. And like this is where like the depravity really starts to like come in. Like so Holmes actually kills Pearl with chloroform. He puts chloroform over her mouth and kills her. And on that same day where he, sorry, the mic was low, guys. On that same day, he tells Julia, like, I'm gonna perform the abortion, and I'm gonna take you downstairs. I'm gonna lead you downstairs. And she goes downstairs and sees the operating tables and all that, and the stuff that I read in Murder in America is like, you can't know what her exact thought process was, but you would have to have been scared.
Oh, definitely.
You know, but he ends up suffocating her with chloroform as well. So that's pretty fucked, man. Like
Definitely.
that's a murder of a child and a murder of a pregnant woman at once.
Yep. And so she was actually the body that
That is the very first. It's the very first skeleton that they sell, right?
yeah, Charles Chappell. Yep.
Yeah.
He was the first. She was the first skeleton. Yep.
So at that point, because we have Peitzel has been in the mix for a while,
Yes.
which like we call him a goon.
Yeah. He was goon number one. Chappell was goon number
He was
two.
goon number one. So like at that time, Peitzel was just a drunk. He was just a drunk, and you know, like Holmes was taking advantage of him all the time. And like he's like, all right, there's this pharmacist named Lindsley Killy. Killy is the way it's spelled out, Killy, Killy. And like Killy had like this cure-all drug, you know, which he called the barber's pole.
Okay.
To where he would actually inject gold into your body.
Yeah. That seems to cure everything.
It seems to cure everything, but the way I wrote it down, it was like a snake oil.
Exactly.
Like that's the way I kind of wrote it down.
Yep.
And then like Holmes, his whole thing is that he was going to steal the formula.
Yep. So he sent Peitzel there as like a client, quote unquote,
To steal the formula.
but yeah, his real ulterior motive was to steal it.
think about like that's psychopathy at its core. Like he was what you would call a premeditated psychopath. Like think of like everything he did is like how do I benefit from this?
Exactly.
Like how do I get something out of this? But Peitzel came back, didn't have the serum or whatever, and he said that he found a very beautiful lady named Kelly Emmeline.
Chagrin. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it was Emily Chagrin. I was reading my notes like together. So like unbeknownst to Holmes, never even seen this woman, decided that he's going to start seduction. Just because he's a fucking psychopath.
Just from Peitzel's description, basically.
Yeah.
Apparently, she was like tall and beautiful and blonde.
She was 6 foot something.
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah. But he offers her a job at twice the pay, and of course she would take. She took it like you or I would.
Yep.
She accepts, In 1892, he asked her to marry him after several months of like seduction and actually sleeping together. And so that's one of these things to where at that time, like Holmes was like, he was a like I keep using the word dapper. He was a dapper, good-looking man. Like, and women at that time didn't have anything unless they were married.
Yeah, exactly.
Which kind of sucks.
Yeah, but again, he was a professional. He was a businessman. He had a medical degree. So, besides all the psychopathic tendencies, he had some stuff going for him.
Yeah. Well, and the big thing I want to get into on this thing is like in my reading in Murder America, at this point in his psychopathy, he was actually taking pleasure from lying. Like, the big thing that I was reading is like taking a woman, getting them to completely fall in love with you, and then throw them away.
Yep. And like, I think too, something they touched on LP, which I found really interesting. I'm gonna sort of restate what they said essentially, but it's like, he had all these schemes, and like he would sort of build up and build up and build up, and he the stress would just get so much. And then he would fix it, and
it's
everything
like
would be
that's
better.
that's
and
a big
so
psychopathic
he was sort
thing.
of like addicted to the release of solving the problem.
It's like the air out of the balloon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I was reading about that in psychopathy. It's like you create a problem that you know that you have the answer to, but you take it to the point of it being stressful, and then you fix the problem because you know how to fix it, and you just let it press on you. You just do it that way. That's just what you do
for the release, basically.
Yeah. It's a psychological thing that is not. I can imagine it would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
So he seduces her. They
make plans to get married.
They make plans to get married, and he has her fill out the 12 blank envelopes with
like wedding announcements.
They're wedding announcements with no letter inside.
Right.
But the big thing is that they're her handwriting.
Exactly.
And like that's, like think about that's psychopathy at its top, dude. Like he's got this thought out like fucking 10 steps ahead.
He's not playing checkers, he's playing chess.
Yeah, right. Like, and the big thing is like he knew what he was going to do already. He knew what he was going to do already, and like, he was actually what was her sister's name?
I don't have it.
Like she had two sisters, Minnie and no. Am I blending two stories together?
Yes.
But okay, so he ends up sending out after killing her in the safe, right?
Yep. So what happened with the safe?
He puts her. This is the story. He asked her to go into looking for some papers in the safe, and he shuts the safe slowly.
Yes.
He shuts the safe slowly.
He didn't want to slam it and
didn't freak
alert her to the danger.
Yeah. And he stood outside of the safe for like several hours and just pleasured himself. And, yeah. But it was not good. And they actually found footprints because he actually put acid on.
So she suffocated over the next several hours, and she left a footprint on the door because there was acid on the floor, and it etched her footprint in the door.
Yeah, and he ended up selling her skeleton too, which is kind of fucking crazy. Which brings us to the small little window of the World's Fair. So what did you have on the World's Fair?
So it was from May of October to 1893 in Chicago. Obviously, over 27 million people.
And it was huge. It was huge.
Oh yeah, it was a huge event. Chicago is sort of like the Olympics in the sense that cities would bid for it. And previously the prior one was in Paris, where they actually unveiled the Eiffel Tower. And so, like the United States was like really
where
ambitious.
That's the one Tesla was at,
to have a good show. Yeah, exactly. And so between May and October, 27 million people visited Chicago, and they all needed somewhere to stay. Some accounts claim as many as 50 people who stayed at the hotel never made it back home.
Right.
And so it was around this time that Holmes' debtors were all sort of consolidating and getting together.
It was getting heavy.
Yeah, it was getting really heavy. Like they were sort of realizing that he wasn't paying anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like at that point, he was like, "Shit, I gotta get my let's Peitzel, let's think about what we're gonna do.
Yeah, exactly. Goon number 1, goon number 2, where are you?
Goon number, like, I love Goon. Goon number 1, Goon number 2. So he was like starting to think about leaving due to debt. So this is where he kind of like tried to. I keep like looking at my notes and not talking directly into Mike. This is me talking into the mic. This is me looking at my notes. But so about that time is where he was starting to like try to bring together like one of his long cons with Minnie.
Yes.
And like the big thing with her is she was a woman that had she had land in Texas. I think
Right.
it
Well,
was.
so she was actually the last woman that died in the castle, right?
That's
And
right.
so
Yeah,
she
well,
was,
her and her sister.
yeah, exactly. Well, yeah. So she was an heiress from Texas, and she was worth about $4 million in today's money.
Yeah. Well, I have written down 3.5, which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
close enough.
Yep. And so, but he actually, his plan, I think, was to actually get a plot of land from her that was in Fort Worth. And
Yes,
so that was sort of like his long con, was because he was planning on leaving Chicago, and he's like, I need somewhere to set up shop.
Well, that would like without getting arrested or being checked. That's where like the next castle would have probably gone up.
Exactly.
So that's what's kind of fucking crazy. Like that. This he had. What was the big thing with them is like I forget exactly. It was he had he was like next in line. Well, he was trying to get the deed for the land.
Yeah.
And then he asked Minnie and Nanny to go to the World's Fair.
Yep. He invited her and her sister to the World's Fair every night for a week.
Oh, okay.
And then on July 4th, he suffocated them both in his bank vault with
Individually.
individually, neither
Yeah,
knowing what
yeah.
happened to the other.
That was in 1893.
Yep. And Holmes had Peitzel give their clothes to his wife,
Oh, yes.
and then he kept the deed for the Fort Worth land.
Exactly, which is, you couldn't do that now
Yeah.
because there's so much paperwork now.
Oh yeah.
So this is where we get into Georgiana Yolk.
Yep. That she was his last wife in Chicago,
Yeah,
right?
and she survived.
Yeah.
She survived, and that kind of speaks to him actually maybe loving her.
Yeah.
Like maybe loving her. She was like one of the only women that was like involved with Holmes that he actually stayed married to her.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was no divorce or anything like that.
Yes.
So they had a life insurance policy with Ben Peitzel. This is about the time where like this really kind of kicks into gear.
So this was when he, in college, he had sort of thought about the life
Exactly,
insurance scam,
yeah.
but this was when he actually really tried to do it.
Yeah.
So he had Peitzel take out a life insurance policy.
For $100,000 in today's money.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
today's money.
Yep. And so I understand that he was like sending Peitzel money to pay the payments.
Exactly. Keep going.
But he was spending it on booze instead.
Yeah.
And so Holmes had to keep up Peitzel's end of
Which
the,
made
of
it
the
suspicious.
con, too.
Which
Yeah.
made it suspicious.
Exactly.
As fuck. So like that's exactly what I have written down. Like he was like paying Peitzel's portion of it, and like it actually came down within like minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Of it being like canceled, and Holmes was there like to pay the money, and like okay.
Yeah.
So, but the thing, like you said, like Peitzel was this huge drunk.
Yeah.
Like there was nothing that you could count on him to do.
Yep. And so they soon they went to Fort Worth, and he just kind of began the same scams all over again.
Fort
with
Worth, yeah.
creditors and non-payments and stuff, right?
That's where they got caught stealing horses.
Yeah. So they were caught for horse thievery.
Yeah.
And so they left in the middle of the night for St. Louis.
Yeah, they took off to St. Louis, Holmes, and that actually led to Holmes' first arrest.
Yep.
Where he ends up fucking running his mouth.
Yeah, well, so he went to St. Louis, and he tried to do all of the same creditor scams again, where he would like buy inventory and supplies, and he wouldn't pay for it. But by this point, law enforcement was kind of catching up. Like I said, we touched on
this
it a
was the
little
Wild
bit.
West, dude. It was the Wild
Well,
West.
we touched a little bit on it with Butch Cassidy about sort of the evolution of law enforcement and how they eventually
Right.
became stronger. And the Pinkertons actually.
Well,
had a
they
lot to
play
do
into
with
the
this,
story,
too.
yeah.
Yeah. But so, basically, long story short, the creditors all caught on and didn't let him get away with the same schemes in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was jailed for creditor fraud, right?
And that's when he was in jail with how do you say the guy's name? He was the handsome bandit.
Yep. So his name was Marion Hedgepeth.
Hedgepeth. That's what I couldn't.
Yep.
And
so
that was his cellmate.
Yeah. And so he was like
And he wanted to impress him.
Yeah, he was like a big time, like well-known Western outlaw, and so Holmes like wanted to impress him as like a fellow criminal.
Yeah, and he was like, okay, I'll give you $500 if you hook me up with a crooked attorney.
Yeah.
And I had it's Jeff E. In the book, it's Jeff E. D. Howe.
Yep, Jeff the D. Howell. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how he got out of jail. That's how he got out of jail. And when he got out of jail, him and Peitzel took off to Philly in July 21st, 1894.
Okay.
Peitzel and his wife were there. They like went along with him.
Peitzel was in St. Louis, right?
Yes, yes.
Well, I'm saying like his family. He left his family in St. Louis and went to Philadelphia.
Right. Well, what I'm getting at is he spread the family out. This is where he's like starting to spread the family out to like kind of like manipulate where they're at and like send letters and shit like that. But within 1 month, Peitzel was going to be blown up as an inventor.
Yeah.
He was going to be posed as an inventor of like chemicals and whatever.
Right. Yeah. Just like he was like, just like your standard like patent office. Like he was there and like he quote unquote died in an explosion.
Yeah. So within the second month of that, Peitzel's body turns up burnt.
Yep.
And of course, where does it show up? At a patent's office.
Yeah.
It's like left at a patent's office, which he was actually working at, which made it pretty, like that made it even more suspicious.
Yeah.
Because like his what we were looking at what I was looking at in the research is like his shop was like right next to that.
Okay.
So like it's like whatever, but the big thing is like he is blown up and the only thing that's burned up is his face.
Yeah, he had like superficial burns on his face.
Yeah, like the forensic, like this was like the birth of like forensics and like this. I forget. I have it actually later in notes, which is like this officer was like, if you're in an explosion, like usually have like burns on your hands and
multiple limb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, well, the big thing is like Holmes never planned on splitting this money with the Peitzels.
Exactly.
He like never planned on doing that. So he was like, I'm just gonna kill Peitzel. I'm not gonna find a random body. I'm just gonna fucking kill Peitzel. So yeah, I just talked about the beginning of forensics. And after that, Holmes arrived at the Peitzel home in St. Louis that same day, telling Carrie about the plan. He actually Carrie was Peitzel's wife.
Right.
Told her about the whole plan. Just like let her know. And she was like, well, okay, I guess this is my husband. Like whatever, I'm gonna do it. And he's like, well, I need somebody to come identify the body. Don't let the kids know, so they react like their dad's dead.
Exactly.
So let me take. I think Alice was the oldest daughter.
Yep.
So let me take Alice, so she can just react, and and we'll get the money.
Yep.
So he took Alice, and then here's where the shit fucking starts to kind of hit the fan.
Yeah.
He takes her. Doesn't actually take her to identify the body, and then about a week later goes back to Carrie and is like, let me take your other 2 kids because the creditors are after a woman that has 5 kids.
Yeah.
So he takes the other 2 kids and then goes literally gallivanting across the country like Benjamin and the kids are here in Toronto or in Seattle and he actually lets the kids write letters to their mom and fucking throws them in the trash.
Yeah, and so he did that to sort of mislead the authorities, and he would set false trails and go random places. Yeah.
And that's another big thing to the psychopathic mindset. Talk about the foresight of that. I'm going to take these kids over here, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to do over this. I'm going to go over, I'm going to throw off the trail to this, just get out of control of where we're at. You know what I mean? That's just, it's fucking ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and then the youngest son, I think the name was, it's hard to find in records with the youngest son. I think his name was Benjamin.
Okay.
And the big thing, we were talking about earlier, is okay, so Holmes is rolling around with these 3 kids, refuses to buy them new clothes because that eats into the money.
Yeah.
And he looks good. He's got a top hat, and he's got these 3 kids that look like they're vagabonds.
Yep. Just orphans.
Yeah. And so the youngest boy starts to complain, and he fucking kills them with chloroform. And so like I said, I don't want to like hover over that type of stuff. But then it continues, and then he ends up taking the two daughters and doing the same thing with a trunk. Like it was a trunk that they were like just big enough to like crawl into, I think is what it was. And he pipes in gasoline fumes and suffocates them and buries them in the floorboards of a rented house. Or he actually was telling the neighbors that he wanted to bury potatoes in the basement.
Oh,
He's like, I need to bury potatoes. Like, yeah, basement potatoes. That's the thing. But so there was like a 6 month the detectives were after him for like about 6 months. That's where the Pinkertons like came into play in this story.
yeah, exactly.
Which they actually coined the phrase we talked about before, private eye, because it was like the all-seeing eye, I think is what it was.
Yep.
But there was a detective named Frank Geyer
Okay.
that came across the house where Holmes buried the two girls' bodies in.
So was that after?
It was in Toronto, Canada, actually.
Was that after he was like known by authorities? Because
it was after.
Because the handsome bandit was the one that tipped him off.
Oh,
initially,
okay.
right?
I get what you're saying. Okay, so handsome bandit saw the death of Peitzel.
Yep.
And he's like, hey, I know what's going on.
Yeah,
I know what's going on, and I'm going to tell this.
Yeah, and because Holmes never paid anybody, he also never paid that $500.
Yeah, so this is where like the manhunt goes on, because like the handsome bandit's like, dude, like this guy is a fucking serial killer.
Yeah,
and at that time that wasn't a phrase.
Mm-hmm.
But so this is where the Pinkertons like go on the hunt for this guy, because like, and he's not, if you really think about it, it's really not hard to find this guy that's been going around the country with these three vagrant little kids.
Yeah.
And then not paying people. So he eventually is like going around the country doing all this shit, and he ends up getting arrested for insurance scam because of the Peitzel fraud.
Right.
And the Pinkertons like fucking are on it and like put down all their evidence. And then the handsome bandit flips on him and fucking tells everything that he fucking knows. And that's when they actually go and like investigate and search the murder castle.
Yeah, exactly.
And like that's where they find all the shit.
Yep.
That's where they find fucking everything. and before he got arrested, he went and told Carrie that everything's fine, and Henry and the kids are off in like Mexico.
Oh yeah.
Like he was just like lying the fuck out of that, you know what I mean? But so jump forward, like he's completely being investigated now. He's in jail. They're looking at the castle. They're finding out how many people that he's fucking murdered. He's initially convicted of 4 murders, and then a month later bumped up to 9 murders, and then in confession confesses to 27 murders.
Yep.
But if you look at the numbers, he's well above 100.
Oh yeah. Allegedly,
yep. Yeah, allegedly,
And those are just missing people who were never accounted for.
Exactly. You just kind of have to like speculate, but like it's as a true crime nerd as we both are, like I'm pretty sure he was knocking that shit out the park, man. So on May 7th, 1896, he was hung, and the fucked up thing is he didn't die instantly. It took him 15 minutes to suffocate.
Yeah.
But I kind of think that's fitting.
Yeah.
For somebody like that, you know what I mean? But the crazy thing that I was like just looking up like little notes and like facts about Holmes. Right now, to this day, there's a post office that sits on the site of the old hotel.
Interesting.
But that's me and Josh bringing in H.H. Holmes.
Henry Webster Mudgett.
That's right. We didn't have any jokes put together this time.
Yeah, no jokes.
Yeah, but thank you guys for listening, and it's Rufus the Villain's True Crime Corner, and Josh, thanks for being here again.
Of course. Hey, man, I think next month we're probably going to do D.B. Cooper.
I'm so excited for that. I've got some Bigfoot stuff to talk about with that.
Yep,
and you know me, I try to bring that up every single time. So, but yeah, Rufus the Villain's True Crime Corner. Josh, thank you.
Yep. Thanks, guys. See you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you next month.